Good evening. Our Rancho Public Schools Board of Education meeting for Monday, January 23rd, 2023 is now called to order. If all would please arise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Jessica Tyler will lead us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Kim, can you take a roll call for us?
Yes, ma'am. President Galbraith,
Present.
Vice President Morgan,
Present.
Secretary Scott,
Present.
Board Member Tripp,
Present.
Board Member Tyler.
present.
You have a quorum, 5-0.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'd like to welcome everyone out tonight. We have a pretty short agenda. Oh, I say that and then I curse myself when I say that, so I should be careful. But we do want to welcome everyone out. I know it's so cold outside tonight and my kids are hoping for snow, so we'll see how that goes. But tonight we'll start out our meeting with some introductory comments by our Superintendent of Schools, Dr. V. Sue Cleveland.
Thank you. Good evening. And again, thank you for being here. And it's temperature's dropping outside. It looks like we might have snow tonight, and so the calls will be starting, And so, but anyway, we appreciate your attendance. There was a pre-meeting workshop before the board meeting, and Mike Baker, our Chief Operations Officer, and Sal Maniaci, who is, of course, in charge of safety and security, and then comments by Maurice Guerin, Principal of Mountain View, who have visited some sites in both North and South Carolina to look at some of their equipment, some of their technology, some of their safety processes and procedures that are used in that area. And so they shared with the board about the trip and what they learned from the visit and how some of those things could possibly be applied to our district, or things for our district to consider. And I would just emphasize that we're always proactively seeking out the very best options that we have for keeping both our students and our staff safe. We will have the presentation of the audit report for fiscal year 22. The audit committee of the board has met monthly during the audit of the district's finances. The committee members are Gary Tripp, who is the chairperson, Noreen Scott, who is the board secretary, Kelly Wainwright, who is a community member with a strong financial background, Seth Muller, who is a community member and a parent, also has some pretty strong financial background. I also sit on that committee. David Behill, the executive director for finance, and Heather Gabaldon, the director of finance, and Mike Baker also sits as an ex officio member for the committee. The audit was conducted by Accounting and Financial Solutions under the direction of Terry Ogle and Wade King. We did have an exit conference a few months ago, and they presented the findings to the audit committee. And also we had in that meeting a representative from the state auditor's office who had some very good comments to share with us about the process. The report, after we hear that interim report, it is then sent to the state auditor's office, and they do another review, and we're not able to share any of those initial findings until it is signed off by the state auditor. And as soon as we get that signed document and it's approved, then we are able to present it to the whole school board and to the community, which is what's going to occur this evening. We also have a revised resolution, 2212. The board did earlier a resolution in support of improving salaries for our educational assistants, and it was a unanimous degree of support for doing better for a very valuable group of employees in our district. And so there's now been a bill drafted, House Bill 127, that will improve the salaries for education assistants. Positions the last several years have been very difficult and challenging to find individuals who are willing to do the job. And they are a really important part of our program, especially in two areas. Every kindergarten class has an educational assistant by statute, and those have been hard to find. And then the rest of our EAs pretty much work with children with disabilities. In many cases, very high need children. And so, as I said, they're a very important part of our school district. the proposed change that is coming before the New Mexico legislature will move their salaries from 12,000 to 25,000. And we are hopeful that that will pass. And so this resolution will be asking the board to reaffirm that and be more specific about the support for this particular bill. And then the remainder of the board is really on policy updates. The first one, the board will be asked to take action because it's the second reading, and it's a really minor change, but it's under temporary, full-time, and part-time employees, substitutes, and volunteers. And it is related to just one small change as it relates to our standby bus drivers. The other policies the board will be looking at this evening are first reading, so no action could be taken. And so this will be a first review, and as a first reading, as I said, no actions taken. The policy, someone asked me, how are policy changes, how do they happen? How do you get them? Or how can you see changes in policy take place? And so normally, they can come from anywhere. They can come as suggestions of the community. In most cases, they come from the department that it impacts. So if it's a financial change, it usually comes from David Beal. Or if it's a HR change, it usually comes from Mike Chavez. So normally it's brought by the department that will be impacted by that change. And then last, all of the changes are reviewed by Lauren Hatch, our chief legal counsel. And I think sometimes David Mann also looks at those. And their purpose is to make sure they're clear, that they're easily understandable, but more importantly, that they comply with both state and federal regulations and statutes. And these are the policies for first reading this evening: reporting student abuse of alcohol or drugs, fiscal management, goals and priority, the annual budget development, and organizational meeting that the board asked to be put on the agenda last board meeting. And then I just want to kind of end with the spelling bee. We had a wonderful spelling bee. Amanda Galbraith was able to come and be there, and I don't know how you felt, Amanda, but I was just so impressed with the words. I couldn't spell them all, not even close, and some I didn't even know what they were. So they were hard words, but most of the spellers were from our district, from the elementary and middle schools in Rio Rancho. But we had representatives from St. Thomas Aquinas, from the Bernalillo Public Schools, and from Sabi. Given the size of our bee, it was 41 students this year qualified to compete. 5 students will be invited to participate in the New Mexico State Spelling Bee. And so these are the ones who will advance, the students who are going to advance to the state level. The actual spelling bee champion for Rio Rancho was Lucy Worthen, and she's a 5th grader at Joe Harris, and she's in the center of the photo. And then the other state qualifiers were Sophie Otero, who is a 6th grade at Sabi, a 6th grader at Sabi, and Ian Zeder from Eagle Ridge Middle School, Elena Dang, who is from St. Thomas Aquinas, and Lucy Pena from 8th grader from Rio Rancho Middle. But it was a really wonderful bee. It went on for quite a long time. And when you have 41 spellers, it takes a while to get through the process. I was so impressed with the overall preparedness of the students this year. They really had done their homework, and they were just so clear and articulate. So congratulations to all the students who participated, but particularly these 5 who will be advancing to the state bee. And I will answer any questions or any comments you might have.
Any questions or comments from the board? Okay, I think we're good. You know, as I was sitting in the spelling bee, I take on the role of the mom for every single student there is what happens. And so I just like every time anyone who gets out, my heart just breaks for every single one of them. But it was so fun. I talked to the family of the winner, and she was up against her sister at the spelling bee. And so hopefully she forgives her, you know, for winning the spelling bee. But it was really fun to be there. So Thank you, Dr. Cleveland.
The words were so hard.
They were. I can't spell, and it's actually a joke in my classroom as they try to help me sometimes. And I've just gotten over the fact that I don't spell very well. So I was trying to spell out every word in my mind, and sometimes I got it right, and a lot of times I didn't. Okay, so we'll now go to approve the prioritized agenda and propose time allocations.
Madam President, I'd like to make a motion to approve the prioritized agenda and proposed time allocations.
This is Board Member Jeff Morgan, I second.
Okay, we have a motion by Jessica Tyler and a second by Jeff Morgan. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries 5-0 on that. We'll now go to our public comment. We do not have any public comment that's signed up here in the boardroom, correct, Kim? Right? No one signed up. Okay. So we do have 5 public comments that came in on our public comment form. So it's hard to say. And so I will summarize the comments that came in. We had 5 that came in, and 3 of those were all about Spark Academy. So Sylvia Baca, Marty Perez, and Jonathan Daniels all asking for us to consider keeping Spark Academy. And then the other 2, we had one from Shay Marie Martinez, was about the school calendar, asking for the committee to really think about families as they move ahead doing that school calendar. And then our last one was by Mary Scowland, and she was asking for us to consider the approval of the resolution that's on our agenda tonight that you will see for EAs. And with that, that's all our public comment for tonight. We encourage our public to come into the boardroom and also to use that form and continue to give us public comment. It helps us as we make decisions. So thank you for doing those. Okay, to our next. So our next item is to move into reports, and we will have our 22 audit report. So David Vigil, our Executive Director of Finance, along with Terry Ogle and Wade King from Accounting and Financial Solutions, will be presenting to us tonight.
Thank you, Madam President, Dr. Cleveland, members of the school board. I'm going to keep my comments brief, but we have Terry Ogle here from Accounting and Financial Solutions Group, and she will be making the presentation about the audit. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming down in the snow.
Did you? It's not snowing yet. Did you want to comment as I go through the findings?
I'll be here for comments, sure.
Okay. So this is your final reporting on your 2022 audit report. And so I'm going to kind of go over the things that were in there. The first thing is we do give you 3 opinions in your audit report. The first one is the independent auditor's report opinion, which is on the financial statements and the overall audit. And then there's a government auditing standards opinion in there and a uniform guidance opinion. And all of those opinions are written by the AICPA. So they look the same as anybody else. So in your audit report, in your opinions, you had an unmodified opinion on the first independent auditor's report opinion. That means that there's no modifications or qualifications in your audit report. So it's, when we say unmodified, that's a good opinion. And that's kind of interesting. We opined on the government auditing, the government-wide financial statements, each major fund, and the budgetary financial statements for the general fund. Then there's an in relation to opinion because you have a lot of funds. So in the back of the financial statements, there's a whole list of other funds. And so the opinion for those are in relation to the opinions in the front. These were looking good. They didn't get as much significance to them. The next opinion is your yellow book or your government auditing standards opinion. And it comes in 2 parts. It comes with an internal control opinion, and it also comes in a compliance opinion. In your internal controls, there is a significant deficiency or a material weakness, and then a significant deficiency, And then there's other matters that don't rise, that aren't as significant, or other reasons. A material weakness is when you have a finding that could affect your financial statements and create a material weakness or a misstatement. So I just want you to kind of see the level of the audit findings as I'm presenting them. A significant deficiency means that it's significant enough that we really think that you should know about it, and that two of them or two or three of them together could make a material weakness. So it's not necessarily going to create a huge material weakness, huge misstatement in your financial statements, but it could if you have several of them together. Then we have other compliance. So this next section is a compliance section. And so there's there's compliance, and then there's other compliance, which means that it's the New Mexico state regulations. So we have some sections in here. The next report opinion that I give you is so in your government auditing standards opinion, there's one material weakness. Let me verify that before I go on. There's one significant deficiency, and then there's 4 other matters. So they're in your levels down there, and we'll get to those. In the uniform guidance opinion, which is your federal awards, there were not any material weakness. I mean, there were no findings in there, and it comes in 2 parts. The first part is on internal controls, and the next part is on compliance, and there's no findings in there, and there's no question costs, which would be anything, a finding that would be $25,000 or above. So now we'll get into your findings. I already went over those. I already went over your material weakness, significant deficiency, and other non-compliance. And so that gives you a good idea of it kind of gives you a detail of it. Then your audit findings for the prior year, you had a management overriding controls, and that one was resolved. And then we had some that did not get resolved, and those include internal controls over student activities, timely completion of I-9s, missing background checks, and controls over capital assets. And that was last year's findings, so we have to kind of just give you an idea of how those went. Then we get into this year's findings, and the first finding is on is in your financial statement section, and it is on construction and on your capital assets, control of your capital assets. And it has to do with the construction in progress and the recapitalization. As the construction in progress is completed, it goes from construction in progress down into buildings or something. And that didn't happen really well. So that's why that one ended up being a finding, because construction in progress is a huge number in this district. And so it does end up being big. In the federal awards, there was no findings. So when you're looking at that page there, it does say federal awards, no findings, so that it's very clear that there's no findings in that section. And now we're going to get into the other non-compliance, which is the state statutes. So they're down lower in your findings area. We had internal controls over student activities, and there was 3 sections in that. Late deposits, greater than 24 hours. That's a state law that you have to have everything in the bank within 24 hours. And so there was a couple that was more than 24 hours. Then there was recording of revenue derived from district assets. And whenever I say that, district assets would be something like the parking lot. And so the schools are keeping the money that they're earning on parking fees in the school itself instead of in the operating fund. Same thing happens with the library and the lost books, where there's a fee for lost books. a lot of times that ends up being left in the school itself instead of going back into the operating fund. So where the source of the asset was purchased, that's where the money should go back to. The last one is borrowing and transferring of individual activity funds. And although this was something that was reported by the state auditor to us, so when we got into it, money was moving from one activity fund to another activity fund. In order to do that, you have to get the students to approve that. It's the sponsors are, I mean, it's the students' money. It's supposed to be the students' money. And you have fiduciary duty for that fund because it's not really the district's money. So the standard is higher for those funds than it is even for the district's money because you always keep track of the district's money. So what we're trying to say is student activity funds is a fiduciary duty, meaning if you have it in trust. And so because you're the trustees of those funds, you have to make sure that everything is really above board in that. So there was some borrowing and some transfers in there. The transfers are quite large. There was not really any justification for some of those transfers, so we don't know why that's happening. But it is just part of the transfers. There did not seem to be any money that left without approval. We did look at that. Then we have the next finding is retention of public records. There was one receipt book that was missing when we were trying to do the test work on the receipt books. And then we get into the next finding is the personnel files. And so there's two parts to that. The first part is the background checks. And so there was still some background checks missing. There were not very many, but I believe we did have a few. And as of June 2014, the district is required by state law to have its own background check. So anybody that's hired after June 14th of 2019, the district has to have their own background check, and they cannot use another entity's background check. And then for the I-9s, there was a couple that was either missing or incomplete, usually incomplete more than missing. The reason why we mentioned that one is because Department of Labor goes around and does audits on these, and they're charging $2,000 for an I-9 that is not accurately completed. And so we've increased our reporting of that so that you don't get stuck with that problem. Okay, so then we had a finding for misuse of resources. The district had some, one of its resources was used by a district manager. So that created a finding. That doesn't mean that any of your assets left or there was any fraud involved, but there was a shop used for a vehicle to be repaired. The last finding is over expenditure of a line item, and this is due to the administrative fee that the county charges the district. So they charge a 1%. So the last month in June, when you're not allowed to increase your bars anymore, and that last payment comes through, so you automatically have to charge the 1%, and that caused you to have a line item over expenditure. Did you have anything to add to that, any of that?
Not right now.
Okay, so the next thing that we're going to go into is financial highlights. And this is over a 5-year period. So the bottom line is the general fund, the cash for the general fund, and you can see that it's pretty much consistent. The top line is the cash that is in the other funds. And you can see that from 2018 going into 2021 that your cash balances have dropped. Part of that has to do with the fact that this year especially, PED, since when COVID happened, PED increased the refunds to the district. They were getting them out pretty quickly. And this year, they've really slowed that down. So everybody's everybody's receivables have increased this year. The next one is the general fund's cash covering other funds. And so you can see that over the 5 years, last year you were way down. And this is the general fund. You also have a federal fund, Medicaid, that covers some of your cash balances because that's in a different bank account, but we're only reporting on the general fund. The next one is revenue and expenditures in the governmental funds. And so you can see how your expenditures are on the top and your revenues on the bottom. And this is accrual, modified accrual. So you can see that your expenditures are higher than your revenue. So you're using your cash balances there. And he pointed out that in 2020, you had capital outlays of $45 million. And that's why that one was higher than any other, because you were doing a lot of capital outlay. The next one is the per student revenue and expenses. And this is across the whole district. So it's for 20, 21, and 22. And that's an average of your student count on your 40, 80, and 120 day counts. And then your revenue and expenses on those amounts. So we just divide. For your capital assets, which is the next one, you can see the capital assets for the district and the depreciation. So the red is the depreciation and the green is your capital assets. And that's so that you have some idea of the age of the district's buildings. Some districts have really old buildings, so the red's about the same or halfway up. And so you have some pretty young buildings. The next one is the long-term debt. And you can see with that one that your long-term debt is pretty consistent across the board, that you're paying it off. Even though you're doing a lot of capital outlay, you are paying down your debt. Not down, but it's staying even. The next one has to do with your net pension liability. And you can see that from year to year, how much it increases and decreases. This is one of the items that the district doesn't really have any control over. It's controlled by the actuarials for the pension liability. So these numbers go on your books, and you don't have any control other than they're on there. You can't put out a bond issue to get rid of it. So then we go to the summary, and so overall, my opinion is, or our opinion is, that the district appears to be operating well overall, that you're improving on your audit findings and working to resolve your repeat findings. Your cash balances are declining, but some of that has to do with the fact that you have an increase in your receivables from other governments. Some of the funds have been delayed in getting your funds back for state reimbursement. The pension costs are going to continue to increase. In 2000, you went from 14.15% to 15.15% in 22, 16.15% in 23, and in 24, it's going to be 17.15%. On the GASB 87, which was the big thing to get implemented this year and hard to understand, you did well, and your implementation was done timely and accurate. You're in the process of doing your Tyler conversion, so that ought to be fun and entertaining, and hopefully you guys have a good time and get some reports that are very usable. The district did really well, and we did very much appreciate working with you, and we really enjoy that. And we thank you for having us as your auditor.
Well, thank you so much. And David, did you want to add anything to the report before we go into any questions or anything, or Dr. Cleveland?
Sure, I can just add that that my staff works really well with both Terry and Wade. And we're able to get things to them timely. They're able to provide a lot of support in terms of some of the understanding what those accounting standards requirements are, especially with the leases. I can tell you that that Rio Rancho, I think, was the one, if not the first, to comply with the GASB 87 requirement, and that was last year, I think. And so I think most districts are a year or two behind that implementation. So I'm really pleased that with our staff and with the working relationship that we have with AFS. They also work, some of their other clients have the Tyler Technologies school ERP that we're going to be moving to. So they're going to be very familiar with the reports that come out of that, how to go about selecting the samples and testing moving forward. So we expect them to be a very helpful resource in the couple of years to come. So.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And then Dr. Cleveland, did you want to add anything?
Let's let the board ask
Okay.
questions, and we'll try to respond to questions that the board may have.
Okay.
I'm sure they have some.
Sounds great. So we'll start with Gary. You were our chair at the time of this audit. So any questions or comments you want to make?
One question we have over here is, and I should know it, but I don't, is the slide where it says net pensions and OPEB liabilities. What is OPEB?
OPEB, other, just a minute, I gotta look at it, other pension, employee benefits, other pension employee benefits. And that is your RHCA, retiree healthcare.
Okay, thank you. A question for David is just from, I was just wondering with some of these things is how is the new software program coming along, which is going to help us keep moving positively forward. I just want to kind of a quick update. How's that coming?
So we've started, thank you for the question, Mr. Tripp. We've started our general ledger training actually today. So me and my finance staff has been in all-day training from 9 o'clock this morning through all day Thursday. So all this week we'll be training on the general ledger. The dual entry for the general ledger has started right before Christmas. And so any new accounts that we're creating for our current year in our current software, Alio, we're also having to create in the new system starting now. And so that dual entry activity has started, and it will roll out over the course of different functions of the finance office. So we will have a time period in, I think, early March when we'll start dual entry for payroll. And some stuff also for purchasing. And so it's a lot of extra work that my staff is having to take on over the course of this implementation. So there'll be some later evenings and early mornings to get our regular work done. The result is going to be a system that is more efficient. It will track things more effectively. And provide greater flexibility for our different departments and schools in order to be able to track the things that we need to do and to mitigate some of the audit findings that Ms. Ogle just reported to you all. So we expect it to be a very user-friendly system that will help the district over the course of the next several years.
Yeah, I just know that's going to be a good system to help us take care of some of this stuff. And I know directors out there want to be 100% accurate. So I think that's the reason for asking it. But if I'm thinking right, this is my last comment, is cash balances have dropped since 2018. And we're looking at that slide. I don't know, but I may be completely wrong, but I like that. I'm glad that we're doing everything we can on a daily basis to ensure that the kids have what they need, whether it's a building or whatever the case might be. So I don't mind seeing that being very low, but I may be thinking wrong, but thank you.
Thank you. Jeff Morgan, anything?
I just have one question. 11, you talked about the missing or incomplete forms I-9s, and you said that it was going to be increased. Can you explain that again? Because I see potential $2,000 penalty per form. Are you saying that's going to go up? I just want to make sure I'm clear on that. That's all.
No, that wasn't enough.
Yeah.
No, it's not going to increase, but there's an increase in audits by Department of Labor. And so as we have discovered that this is becoming an audit, because I ran into a lady that she was audited by them and they charged her $2,000 for each. Well, if you consider she probably only had 10 employees and it was probably heart-wrenching for her to have to pay that. But for a district this big, if they come in and go, oh, well, the completion date for the hiring completion date is not completed, you have to pay $2,000, and it's that nitpicky. So if they come in and say that, if I haven't been telling you that this could be a problem for you, then you're irritated with me, or you could be. So I'm trying to not allow that to happen. And so that's why we've stepped up our reporting of that, because usually what we do is go, it's okay, it's just I-9s. And so we've bypassed that for right now because we want everybody to understand what the liability could be.
I think David has a number for us. So it's a hand
Yes,
signal.
Mr. Morgan, out of the over 1,800 employees that we have, the audit finding was for one I-9.
So that's good.
So that's a pretty good percentage.
Well, and we do appreciate you looking into that more, since you are saying that they're upping the audit with that. But go ahead.
We only tested like 40 or 50. We tested 50 employees, but we've tested about 40 or 50 employees every year that we've been here. So
That's good.
slowly but surely we'll make it through them all.
Yeah.
And then my only comment, Gary had asked, you had asked, and it's Gary's question about this new software. Will it help find some of these findings? And you answered the question. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Very good job, by the way. Thanks for the presentation.
Okay. Thank you. We'll go to Jessica Tyler.
Yeah, my only question is, I hate having prior year findings not resolved. So kind of, is there an action plan to address those 4 findings? I know 2 of them seem more of like the HR issues with the forms of the timely completion of the I-9 and missing background checks. But just what are the plans for you guys to address those repeat 4 findings?
Thank you, Ms. Tyler. So the 2 that we believe that this new software implementation will help with will be the capital assets. There has been some challenges with the way that our assets are being recorded in Alio in terms of where the depreciation is first calculated from, in terms of the date that the asset was placed into service and when the construction in progress is finished. And so that is, we've looked into that and how we're going to move those balances over to our new software, and we believe that moving those over will help resolve that finding. In terms of the student, the school activities, one of the things that's going to that we have been working towards is making sure that moving forward that all school activities, the purchasing function will actually come to the district office. And so requests for fund balance transfers and things like that, those will also come to the district office. So there's going to be more scrutiny, and we're going to up our internal control game in that respect, and that will be addressed by the new software as well.
Okay. And then Mike Chavez has something to add. Come on up, Mike. I had to make him come to the microphone.
President Galbraith, Dr. Cleveland, members of the board, I want to give you a brief history of background checks in New Mexico. Prior to 1997, background checks were not required for any educators in the state of New Mexico or any school employees. So Dr. Cleveland and I never actually had a background check until there was a small debacle at APS. And Matt Montano at the time called all the districts and said, would you please have everybody go and get a background check? But honestly, at that time, which was actually just now in 2015, there were quite a number of us in this district who had never had a background check. So until that time, there were no background checks required. After that time, background checks were required. At that time, All that was required was that you went to the local police department, had your ink fingerprints taken. They ran those up to the FBI. We got back a little email, and the email simply said, no criminal history found. That's all it said. And we have those in. I have a large number of employees who still have those in their personnel files. Then what happened was the PED went to the company called Cogent, which previously had a different name, and I'm trying to remember what it is right now, but I don't remember. Here's what happened. When they went to Cogent, PED said if it's a background check for licensure, we don't want employees to have to do 2 background checks. Therefore, we are going to share our background check with all the school districts. However, they had no process for doing that. And what they told us to do was to print the AS400 screen, which said clear background. Unfortunately, the auditors didn't agree with that paperwork. And so we got some findings on those. And we went ahead and took the findings, and we decided to do an internal audit, and we audited all of our staff. Then we had this lovely little thing in 2020, and that was in 2020, because as you know, in 2019, the FBI came in and said, you can't share those background checks. You must do 2 background checks, one for employment, one for licensure. That was when the new bill was written, requiring 2 background checks. So prior to that, 2 background checks were not required. So then 2020 hit, which was in the middle of our audit, and all the UPS stores closed down and refused to do background checks because they wouldn't let people in to their stores. So our audit kind of went kaput. We couldn't do an audit because we couldn't get people into those stores to do background checks. We knew there were people that needed these background checks who either had paperwork that was not compliant with the audit, or who, now remember, I've been working here since 1995. We have people who've worked here prior to that. We have a lot of people who've worked for this district close to 30 years, a lot of people. This is a very, very well thought of district. We have a lot of employees with longevity. So we have a lot of employees who've been here a very long time. So the thing about the audit is they may only audit 50 people, but it can be anybody in the district. It's not going to be people from 19 forward. It could be someone who's been here since, say, 1995. So they may have a funny looking audit or a funny looking background check, whatever. And that's fine. We don't have a problem with that. But what happened was we didn't get to finish our audit. We have rerun our audit this last year. And that's where we're working to make sure we're compliant with everybody having a current background check, which is lots of fun because lots of people get mad because they're like, why do I have to do a background check again? I've been here for 25 years, but they do it. And so this next year, we're hoping that we won't have anybody that doesn't have a background check. Then the I-9s, and this was nobody's fault. There was a miscommunication between us and the auditors, and we were under the impression that we were not allowed to fix an I-9 if it wasn't correct. We did clarify that with our auditing company. Thank you very much. And we will be running a complete audit of all I-9s. But again, we have I-9s going back 30 years. They're these crumpled up little pieces of paper that were stored in a drawer. And we have had to go through and scan all of those, get them into our electronic personnel files, and then go through, review all of them, because it's not just whether they have one, but also whether it's absolutely complete. So we're working on that as well. So I want to assure you that we are working very hard to make sure all of that is caught up as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the thorough
Yeah,
explanation.
Just want to make sure that,
that's good.
because it is very important to us. It really, really, especially background checks. We are the whole department is very, very concerned that everyone have a clear background check that is working with our students.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Stories about this, I think Mike shared with us at one time, is we had a PED show up and they didn't have background checks. And so they said, well, we're PED. And Mike said, thank you. Mike said, well, you can't come in. PED said you can't come in without a background check.
Right.
So we had our own public education department that didn't have background checks and weren't willing to really produce them to come into the district. So that kind of shows the complexity of this issue. But there is some talk, and I hope at some point it happens, of some sort of a universal check across the state, so that when we have people who come from APS, and that's a state-approved background check, that we won't have to keep sending people back out to repeat it, because I don't understand the time and effort with it. But until that is changed, then we'll adhere to what the law says that we have to do. But it would be nice to have that universal check for the state.
So we're very appreciative of our auditors and the great job they do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Noreen, Scott?
I have a quick question of the auditor. How long do you have to keep your I-9s for?
Forever.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. The other comment I want to make is I've served on the audit committee since I came on the board, and I'm always feeling terrible when I hear a finding, and I think, oh my goodness, we need to worry about it. But we really don't. Our school district, I have to say, does a fabulous job. And I really hope people understand that these findings are for the most part, not very large. And if you look at the complexity, we're pretty proud of this audit.
We actually combined last year you had two findings. You had the I-9 and the background check, and they were separate because they were there was more to it. This year we combined those into one because it's like minimal, it's like a small error that was found. So it's gone from two findings to one finding this year. And so it is, and that's why I'm trying to tell you, these are small findings, not big findings. Your big finding was your construction in progress, and it's more the reconciliation of the construction in progress. It's not money left the district, nothing left. That would be a huge finding. But you have a good district. It's ran well, and we haven't had any problems.
Thank you so much.
And Ms. Scott, I'd just like to add that an audit is an opportunity for us to learn about our organization and learn where we can improve. And so the way that we look at it is it's a continuous improvement activity, right? And we're always looking to make sure that we're as transparent as we can be, and that we're looking for places where we can make things better. So that we can use our resources the best that we can for our kiddos. So with that said, and I'd just like to make one more comment about the student activities. We've been rolling out communication to our principals and to our administrative assistants so that they know that changes are on their way, they're coming. And we're going to continue with that communication plan over the course of the next 6 months so that we can we make sure that we're preparing everybody, and they are included in our training calendar as well. So,
David, I'd just like to say thank you for a really good audit, and thank you to our auditors. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
You have questions or?
I think actually they've covered my questions.
Okay.
So if you have,
Just one comment based on what David is saying. It is a learning experience. We continue to learn and grow. And I think it was under this category of transfer of individual activity funds that people had to learn. And for example, if you had money in homecoming, you had extra money there, you had to have permission to move it to prom, right? And you had to talk to kids about that. And so some of it's just learning things that initially seem pretty intuitive. It's still money for activities. It's still going to kids. But there still is a process to find out, right, if the students approve that money being transferred from one area to another. So it is a continual learning experience for us. And I understand it, but I also understand their view of it was activity money. It was still going to kids. It wasn't going to adults. It was just going to a different thing. So we do learn, and it does help us get better.
okay, anything from anyone else on the board? Okay.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for coming out from Farmington. And I want to echo Noreen Scott's. Thank you so much for your leadership. And we're really grateful to have you with the district.
That's a great job.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. We can clap for our audit.
All right.
All right. We'll now go to item H to approve the consent agenda.
Secretary Scott, I move to approve the consent agenda.
Board Member Gary Tripp, I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by Noreen Scott and a second by Gary Tripp. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries 5-0. I do have a quick comment on the consent. If I could get just off of that, and I can't remember if it was in, I guess this would go to probably to David. I can't remember if it was in the report, but on that student meal debt, if I could just get the number pre-pandemic of where we were sitting before with that and to where we are now, which is pretty huge. So I would just, if I could just get that number, I'd love to have that. So you can just send it even the superintendent report or however is easiest. So, okay, thank you. So we'll now move into business. We will consider the approval of resolution 22-012 educational assistant salaries. And this will be presented by Dr. Cleveland.
Okay, you've seen the original resolution. This just enhances it a little bit, so I don't think we really need to go through all of it. But this actually endorses the bill that will move our educational assistant salaries from 12 as the minimum up to 25. And so if you'd like to talk about it more, but it's really just some minor changes to your earlier resolution. We are really excited. Our EAs are really excited about the possibility of this. One of the things that I heard that was kind of shocking to me, and I just, one of our EAs was sharing that after she pays her benefits package for her family, she makes nothing. So this will definitely help with that. And we've been asking, you all have been supportive of that for a long time. I'm really glad that people are listening and are seeing fit to bring this bill forward. And I certainly hope it passes. They do such a good job for us and we need them a lot. Mike, do you know how many approximately positions we still have vacant right now for EAs?
I believe we have probably around 30 openings still.
Yeah.
And I do believe that reflects the salary of Dr. Cleveland. I truly believe that because as I've said before, when the salary increased this year, we increased to $15 an hour, which means that on average, the EA will make $21,000 a year. However, that did raise them up to a higher tier in the benefits brackets. I do understand that the governor has an initiative to pay individual premiums, which I do believe would be a significant help if there was an increase in their salary, plus they didn't have to pay that initial premium to their benefits. They would certainly see a greater take-home pay. But right now, I do believe that what's inhibiting our ability to hire EAs is the salary, because we don't seem to be having difficulty filling custodial, bus driver, and other positions in the district.
Thank you.
Madam President, Mike, if you don't mind, does that 30, does that include EA bus drivers,
No, just
those
EA.
ones that,
Would be classroom EA.
just classroom? Okay.
Member trip.
Yeah.
So, as Dr. Cleveland mentioned, we have EAs who work in 3 different areas. We have kindergarten EAs. We have EAs who work in what we call essentially a general education EA who works in perhaps the library or the resource room, something like that. And then we have EAs that work in the special education classrooms. And honestly, it's the special education classrooms that we're struggling the most with, because those are the students who need the assistance the most. We're just, and we, as I've said before, we hold, as a matter of fact, we had a job fair last week. We had a tremendous turnout. We had very few people show up. I had several people show up asking about teaching jobs. I had very few people show up, if any, asking about educational assistant jobs.
Thank you.
And Board Member Tripp, to that point, that's definitely going to have to be looked at in the transportation formula. Because, as you know, we're pretty much in the hole in terms of transportation funding to start with. But the attendants are very important on the buses and often work with the very same children that need their services on the bus with the EA that supports them in the classroom. So it would be wonderful if the state would look at that, but it is a completely different fund, and to look at our bus attendant salaries as well. So you make a really good point, but they serve the same children in many cases.
Madam Chairman, with your permission, I move approval of resolution 22-012, educational assistant salaries.
I'll second.
Okay. Do I have any other questions from the board before we go to vote? Okay, so we have a motion by Noreen Scott and a second by Jessica Tyler. And you want to take a roll call vote for us, Kim?
Vice President Morgan,
Yes.
Secretary Scott,
Yes.
Board Member Tripp,
Yes.
Board Member Tyler,
Yes.
and President Galbraith.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to just say that on behalf of all the EAs that I work with a lot, who are fabulous employees for and do such a wonderful job for our students, that I very much appreciate you all supporting them, and I know they do as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Appreciate it. Okay, item B. So this will be our second reading of changes to policy 724, temporary full-time and part-time employees, substitutes, and volunteers. And Mike Chavez is going to have to come back up. He will be presenting. Yes, and he's our Executive Director of Human Resources.
Thank you, Madam President, Dr. Cleveland, members of the board. I've asked Lynn Carl to join me this evening. This is a fairly simple change to this board policy. What we are proposing is to make a small change to our standby drivers, and to allow standby drivers at 3.5 hours and up to be considered full-time employees, so that they would have the ability to access benefits once they were hired on. We did come up with an MOU that I believe was included in the superintendent's report. So Board Member Tyler, I hope that you had an opportunity to take a look, or all of you, but I know that Board Member Tyler requested that. And again, I'll let Lynn Carl speak very quickly and let you know kind of what the need really is for this change.
Good evening, President Galbraith, Dr. Cleveland, and board members. This would be a great help to us if we can get some part-time employees that can still get benefits. As of right now, we have 2 full-time drivers that are probably going to have to go to part-time just because of childcare needs. I know one in particular, benefits are huge to her. If we can't do this, she will have to quit. We have another employee that retired that really wants to come back and work part-time only, and he does need benefits. And so this would be a huge help to us. They can work an AM route or a PM route and still get the benefits that they need and still get those kiddos to school.
All right, thank you so much. Do we have any questions from the board on the second reading? Dr. Cleveland, anything else? Okay. Okay.
Madam President, this is Board Member Tyler. I'd like to make a motion to approve the changes to policy 724, temporary full-time and part-time employees, substitutes, and volunteers.
I'll second that.
All right. We have a motion by Jessica Tyler and a second by Gary Tripp. And then Kim, if you'll take a roll call vote for us on this one.
Vice President Morgan,
Yes.
Secretary Scott,
Yes.
Board Member Tripp,
Yes.
Board Member Tyler,
Yes.
and President Galbraith.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move into our first readings of some policies. So our first one will be first reading to changes to policy 1022, reporting student abuse of alcohol or drugs. Sherry Carver, our Executive Director of Student Services, will present.
Good evening, President Galbraith, members of the board, and Dr. Cleveland. I bring to you tonight policy 1022. This is the policy that requires all school employees who know or suspect any student is using or abusing alcohol or drugs to report to the school. And it's up to the school board to decide how that report happens. This actually came to my attention during a counseling PLC meeting one afternoon, and a counselor brought up this policy. And they wanted to know, where is this form that I'm supposed to be using to report this on? And so I started digging into that, Mariah and I did, and we did not have a uniform form across the district for them to report on. So in thinking about that, we wanted to make it easier for employees to report, not have to go look for a form. So the first change that I bring to you is that reports shall be made to the principal or assistant principal of the school in which the school is enrolled. So that gives them the opportunity to report it by email, verbally, text, radio. We don't care how you do it, just make sure you report it.
Okay.
And then the second change is in C, and the law does not require one school day. We wanted to give them more leniency here. You need to report it within a reasonable period of time. So those are the two changes I bring to you tonight.
Okay, thank you. And questions from the board? Any thoughts on? Okay, and over here, any questions? Okay, Dr. Go ahead.
Real quick,
Mhm.
a reasonable period of time?
Reports shall be made within a reasonable period of time after the employee learns or suspects.
Are you wanting it to be more concise?
You want it to be more specific?
Doesn't really mean much.
Say it again.
It doesn't really mean much. I mean, what's reasonable to me might be one day, but I think
That's
where
why
this
I'm
was
asking.
coming from was it happens on a Friday afternoon
Exactly.
and you can't get to anybody until Monday morning. I think that's kind of where it developed, but I wouldn't want someone to say, oh, 3 weeks later, that was a reasonable period of time, you know, so I don't know what the answer, but it really was driven, I think, initially by weekends.
Mhm. I mean, if we were to put a week in there, would that be reasonable, or is that still causing us?
Well, and then the
Problems.
part comes in of tracking it.
Mhm.
Okay, you learned about it.
Yeah.
Now, are
I
you
know.
are you violating our policy? You know, you need to report it. You need to report it soon, quickly,
Mhm.
within a reasonable period of time. At the earliest opportunity.
The earliest opportunity.
I like that.
Maybe we could change. We have Lauren. Can I ask your opinion? I don't know if you want to.
Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Cleveland, I am Lauren Hatch. I don't know. I don't have an opinion. It needs to be relatively quickly. And the idea was to build in some flexibility for the principals to kind of manage that.
Okay.
But we could be more specific. And we could take a look at that and bring it back with the second reading on a different suggestion, if that's okay.
Yeah, it looks like Michael Baker has a thought too. Yeah.
Something like as soon as practical.
Okay.
We'll take a look at it.
Sometimes it's not practical to report immediately. And so sometimes like with writing policy, we'll use language like report immediately, report in the next amount of time, report it as soon as reasonable, report it as soon as possible, but report it as soon as practical gives the individual the complete way.
Okay. I like that. How does that feel, Jeff? Does that feel a little better?
As soon as practical, do you
As
like
soon
that?
as practical.
Well, I mean, you know, it's not a matter of whether or not I like it. I just need to make sure we're clear on even the word practical. I mean, I could sit around and beat that thing to death as well because it's a matter of somebody's opinion. I guess I'm just more concerned about the severity of what's going on that needs to be reported. I mean, if it's pretty severe, are we asking somebody to take their time to report it, or are we asking them to be as soon as possible on this? That's the only reason why I'm asking. I don't want to take up too much time. This is just the first reading, and I'm hoping that by the time you come back with the second, you might have a better description of this phrase here. So I trust that you will.
Okay,
Okay. Thank you so much.
thank you.
One option would be 3 days and it would cover the weekend in case it happened on Friday. But I want to emphasize, I think what was said, the longer you wait, the less of a chance we're going to have in dealing with it. And if it's a serious issue, then, I mean, it just makes it easier to investigate and act on the quicker that it's reported. So, but I also, if it happened on Friday afternoon, I wouldn't want someone to feel like because they didn't get it that Friday afternoon, they violated policy as long as they got it to someone on Monday morning.
Right.
So anyway,
Okay.
we'll work on that.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts from you, Sherry, on it? Okay. I think we're good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next, I'm going to announce all of these that Michael Baker will be presenting. So it's going to be first reading to changes to policy 600, which is the fiscal management goals and priority objectives. Then it'll be first reading for policy 601 for annual budget. First reading changes to policy 602 for budget development. And all these will be presented by Michael Baker, our Chief Operations Officer.
And Madam President, Dr. Cleveland, members of the school board, with me is David Vigil, the Executive Director of the Finance Department. And so 600, 601, and 602 for the primarily has to do with just some basic language changes. The real change, I think, is in policy 602, and that is something that we brought up to the Finance Committee, and I think we had agreement at that point, was to reduce our cash reserves instead of a 2% to 1%. So that's kind of the real change to the budget process, is the cash reserves. And so we're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place when it comes to cash reserves. The legislature, they don't want us to have cash reserves. However, financial institutions such as Moody's, when they're looking at our rating, they want us to have more cash reserves. So that's kind of the dilemma that we're in. Going into next year's budget, it will make things a little bit easier to balance because we're not going to have the vacancy savings that we had in prior years, we believe. So I think this will overall be a positive for our budget. And so we stand for questions.
Dr. Cleveland, anything you want to add? Okay, and then go ahead, Gary.
The only question I had in looking at all three of them, going back to 600, and it wasn't something that was in red that of a change, but it was under C. It says to ensure effective support, the Board of Education intends to guide the expenditure of funds in order to extract the greatest educational returns. And by law, we have to make bar adjustments, and then we got to approve them, and then the state of New Mexico has to approve them. So I just didn't know if guide is the right word within the within the law. And I don't know if there's something, or if I'm in the wrong area of my thought process. But just when we're having to approve bar adjustments every board meeting, and then we have to get approval from the state of New Mexico, just within policy, if it should be worded in that kind of. But am I off base in my thinking? I don't know, because I know. I don't know. I don't even know if I'm asking a question, but I just lost when I read that.
So, Mr. Chair, are you suggesting that it doesn't go quite far enough to say that you need to approve what's going on here in terms of the expenditure of funds?
Right. Yeah. Is this clear that of what the expectations of the board is by law now?
Well, I mean, there's a requirement that you all have to approve the budget.
Right.
So, and so I think that requirement is clear in there.
I agree.
There is a requirement that whatever adjustments are made that you all approve as the governing council or as the school board need to be approved also at the PED level. So you may approve an adjustment to the budget that the PED says no to. And at that point, I guess maybe at that point, there's that splitting of hairs in terms of the authority granted to you.
So are we approving the expenditure of funds in order to extract the greatest educational returns? You know,
You are one level to it, Mr.
one
Tripp,
level, yeah.
Yeah. There's the.
That's where my confusion was, yeah.
So
You're
because,
right, we're one
because the
level.
PED is that second level, you are guiding with the ultimate approval coming from the PED for those budget adjustments. And they actually, the PED also approves the budget. It's in its entirety as well. So there are these levels for sure.
And I agree that that's the major changes from 2% to 1%. That's what we're looking at.
Okay. Other,
my question.
okay, thank you. Good.
Mm.
Other questions from the board on this one? Any other questions? Okay. Anything else on any of those you guys want to share? I think you went through all of them. I think we're good. Okay. Okay. It's going too fast. I feel like we need to chat for a little bit. Just kidding. All right. We'll do item G, which is the first reading to policy changes 214 organizational meeting. Lauren Hatch, our chief counsel, will present.
Good evening again. Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Cleveland, Lauren Hatch. This is some changes that were discussed in the last meeting. I'm not sure if the version you got shows the red line. It does show it? Okay. The only change is really some temporary language that we could take out probably after 2024. But under the current policy, officers serve for a period of 1 year or until their successors are elected and qualified. Adding that last sentence in the first paragraph would say that in 2024, at that organizational meeting, the officers would be elected for 2 years and then subsequently for 2 years. Now, that's the only change. I stand for questions.
Okay. It is, and it really is a pretty big change. So does anyone have any questions on this one? So, and we're keeping it this way for this year. I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I don't think we need to put a year in the policy. We've already taken the action for the current year based on the policy of a year.
I guess that's true.
So I think you could actually just take that first paragraph, strike the new language. I would move it under the second paragraph. And just change that shall hold the office for 2 years or until their successors.
Will we be good doing that at the next meeting?
I think
because we already acted on it, right, for the 1 year.
Well, the reason why I did it that way, originally I thought, we'll just strike out 1 and we'll just go to 2. That's pretty straightforward. But because the officers are serving right now, it makes it seem like their term is 2 years. Mm-hmm. And like we would all know that. Mm-hmm. But who knows what
just
could
makes
happen.
it cleaner.
Well, that's why I say that for that second paragraph, it states that the first meeting in January shall administer. So you would also need to change that because it wouldn't necessarily need to be every January then.
It's for the one starting in 2024. So probably what we would do is in 2024, after they're elected, we would revise it, take out that second, the sentence that we're adding, and then
fix January.
Fix the January in the second paragraph.
I think it's fine. We can go ahead and prove it this way, and then it'll be brought again, though.
We'll do another read through it before we come back for a second reading.
Yeah.
See if there's a way we could simplify it that still makes it work for now.
Okay. I think it's fine. We can look at it again too.
Happy to do that.
Okay.
Yeah. The other thing we could do is we could not do it till the end of the year.
Yeah. We could hold off.
Not change it now.
December.
Do it in December. And then I just don't like putting a change that's in a policy that has a year on it that then you're going to have to go back. I just don't think it's that clean. So I would recommend just waiting until the end of the year.
That's fine. We could do that too. I mean, there's no reason why we can't hold off on it.
I think I actually originally drafted this at the end of 2021.
Yeah, we did. So now, we just have to make sure.
Don't forget. Yes.
We just have, and I guess that's the other thing. We just need to make sure everyone's kind of on board with it, and then
I do agree with having them 2 year, 2 year terms.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, for the offices, I think that's much better.
I think
December though would save us from having to go clean it up later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So we can do it in December. Let's just not forget. I don't know. I won't forget.
Kim
I'll-
will
Put this
remember.
on the agenda for December,
We'll
please, Kim.
Yeah.
It's on the agenda now.
Madam
Okay.
President,
Mhm.
I'd like to request once a month that we get an update on the CTE process and where we're at. Just a very brief update on where things are with construction so that we're clear that we're staying on the timetables that we need.
Okay. Since we're about to go into advanced planning, we can put that into our advanced planning. Thank you, Lauren, so much. That's perfect. Thank you. Okay. So if you would like, that's fine. Did you hear that, Dr. Cleveland?
That's fine.
Okay. Okay. That'll be good. That will be a good thing. Okay. So moving into advanced planning. So there was a change on the governor's prayer breakfast to January. It's January 26th. Though please note that if you haven't already signed up for that, you have to sign up for it. So don't just go up there if you haven't signed up for it. So then,
We're past the due date
yes,
on
yeah,
the invitations
Mhm.
to sign up.
yes.
And so, but you know what? Sometimes they just take pity. And so if your heart's really ongoing, if you'll let us know, we can call for you and see if they have any additional slots. But I'd hate for you to drive up there and then they say, well, we don't have a spot for you.
Mhm.
So on your invitation, it said RSVP by, but I was a little bit late and they took pity on me. So maybe they will take pity. So let us know and we'll call and see if there's still some spots open.
If you would do that for me, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Everyone else good? Okay. All
And
right.
it's at 7:30 in the morning.
I know that's why I can't be there because I have to teach, unfortunately, at that time. So then February 2nd through the 4th is the Board Institute that will be up in Santa Fe. The 3rd is a half day for AM classes for students, PM in the afternoon staff planning. February 6th we'll have, okay, so on February 6th are we good to have a board workshop at 4 p.m. here? Does that work with everyone's schedule to do that? It's not currently on your calendar, February 6th. And that is, I believe, due to meeting with CNM on the 13th is what we're hoping to meet with CNM on the 13th. So we'll have that workshop. Okay. So Kim, could you just go ahead and get that on the calendars, even if it changes somehow, just so that everyone has it marked? That would be great. February 8th will be a bus rider count day. The 10th is an early release day for schools, and there will be no shining stars. The 13th will be a finance committee meeting along with a board meeting. February 20th, all students are looking forward to will be President's Day, no classes. And then the 27th will be a regular board meeting here at 5:30.
We have a change on that. There's
Okay.
something out here that's not.
Yeah, we'll move finance to the 27th.
Oh, that's right. I
because
just
of the,
announced those. So mhm.
Yeah, this is
Okay.
with the
The CNM.
probability of a joint meeting with CNM on.
Okay. Okay. And that one with CNM, if it all goes through, we will be meeting at the CTE Center for
That is
that meeting. Okay. Okay. Any other with advanced planning? Anything else? Okay. All right. So
Really hope that everybody can be here on the 13th. If we meet with CNM, this has been several years in the making and their board is, I think most of them are all planning to come as well. So it would be a nice celebratory kind of event. And we're really looking forward. We're hoping that everything falls in place. But so right now it's looking very good for the 13th. And however, we're still working. So be sure you're aware of that. We're still working on the MOU, Lauren and their legal counsel. And it is still somewhat dependent upon getting that agreement because we would like you to be able to see it obviously first. It is an MOU. It isn't a contract. So I think that some people thought maybe it was a contract, but it's a much more detailed MOU, kind of setting in writing the process that we're going to work together on this particular project. So I don't know, Lauren, how's it going?
I feel pretty good about the.
Okay.
it feels good. Okay. All right.
All right.
So with that, our meeting for tonight's adjourned. Thank you all so much for coming.